It's Noor Azizan Gardner. How are you doing today?
I'm good. Hello, Matthew. Beautiful day. The sun's out. I love it.
What's happening with you?
I've been reading a lot of things about management these days, leaving behind the notion of management from the Industrial Revolution to what we need now in the 2020, not quite post COVID, in the middle of a pandemic, and what's needed. So that's what I've been doing lately.
So, have you put your finger on who invented this weird thing called management?
If you remember, I mean, this is something that I was reminded again from reading an article in the Harvard Business Review recently.
So, in all this study and the reading of the Harvard Business Review, did you discover who discovered management or invented it?
Do you remember that book, The Principles of Scientific Management by Frederick Taylor? 1911.
Page
Did
Turner.
you?
Couldn't put it down. Couldn't put it
Page
down.
Turner. It was actually, if you're into that. I mean, at the beginning of the Industrial Revolution, if you remember, that was the time when, we have factories starting in England, and the laborers, so to speak, were not highly educated. In fact, perhaps many of them didn't even get the chance to go to school and be able to read and write. So that was the beginning of the creation of what's called the management class.
Yes.
The managers came about from that time period. And Taylor wrote about all of this and on how to maximize productivity and efficiency. And that was an
It seems
interesting
to be
time.
that before industrialization, men were animals and they were paid badly for their muscles. Then, when they went into something like textile processing factories, the satanic mills of the north of Manchester or whatever, that they were really treated less like animals and more like machines.
Yes.
And so that was the idea. So that supervision and training of simple patterns happened.
Mm-hmm.
Extraordinary,
Right.
extraordinary.
It's actually. I mean, I wouldn't say that men were animals. Maybe that's
I'm not
very
being overly rude about their character. Coal mining is about muscular
right.
activity.
That's exactly right. The you need muscled people, men especially, to be able to do very, very hard menial labor. I think that was really quite awful. And then you have factories, and then men became just cogs, machines, so to speak.
Cogs in the machine, exactly. So we talk about assets and liabilities.
Right, right.
Real machines were the assets, and the humans were seen as the liability.
I chose my word very carefully. Men. There were no women at the beginning of the Industrial Revolution in factories because women really didn't work outside the home
Yeah, yeah.
in factories. I mean, I think that we began to see that more and more as the Industrial Revolution expanded, and then World War II happened, World War One, and then World War Two, and I think that's when women started entering the workforce.
Well, of
Um,
course, the revolutionary stages, which are based on need, and we've talked about racism and the rest of it.
mhm.
When there is extreme conditions such as World War II, World War One, suddenly ethnic diversity disappears. Mexicans are reclassified, everyone's up for a game, and women are included in the workforce. One thinks like munitions factories,
Right.
and then that
Yeah.
causes big problems in 1918 or
Hmm.
1945,
Hmm.
when really the social rank within gender is men want to go back and claim the best. What are these women doing? They should be back here, as you said, they should be back in the home,
Right.
cooking up soup and causing all sorts of things. So it's sort of like a ratchet mechanism, progression for gender and then regression for gender.
Somebody, I think one of the CEOs recently said about the fact that right now we really have to focus really on leadership. Leadership has to trump management. I mean, this is, we are, if you, basing on your example that, the wars, World War One and World War Two, the pandemic is an equal crisis
Yeah, yeah.
of equal magnitude. It is a global issue as it was in World War Two, and we will see several shifts in the workforce, perhaps similar to the last big war, but in a different way. And I think that this is the time for us to really be strategic about planning for post-pandemic. And I really think it's really important.
Exactly. Let's just look at that. So it seemed to be that you were bringing other classes or categories or groups in. So let's just hold that for labour, talent, and ideas. We could almost call that diversity.
Yes.
Here, if you're coaching tomorrow, a manager leader going into a group of 10 people, it's not about bringing other people in. I think it's about getting more return on the existing group of 10 people. So what are the gurus that you're reading? What are they suggesting for this leader? Is it a manager, supervisor, leader? Is it something else? How are they relating? What result do they want with
Right.
these 10 people?
Right. Inspiration. How do we create an inspired workplace and an inspired team? How do I have people raring to go to work every day because they want to really contribute to something brilliant, right? And so it's really important for me to really think about that. So recently I've read an article by the founder of the Management Lab,
right,
in the UK. I mean Hamill, and it's brilliant. He talks about how do we find the everyday genius at the workplace.
everyday genius, lovely, lovely.
And
People
that's
viewing now are going, "That's me."
It's me. But basically, it's really about harnessing the people who are on the front lines, wherever they may be, at the factory floor, dealing with face-to-face customer interaction, or face-to-face student interaction, but really harnessing their everyday genius. And I think that this requires a rearrangement of the traditional roles, which which in the traditional roles you have the manager managing. It's a lot about compliance, control, central planning, all the things that is very standardized, because that's pretty much the principle. So
I tell you, I'm going back to a historical time. A million years ago, I was in the Czech Republic as one of these painful managers, and I had a very young crew of people in their 20s. Wonderful characters, but not a vast depth of experience. And what was I doing there? They really had to go from listening to Uncle Matthew, which they weren't very good at. They were chomping at the bit. The phrases they wanted to be released to use their own resources, and I learnt fairly on: get out of their way. Give them some safety. Where there were some complete disasters around confidentiality, and a few other complete career blow-ups. Not for me, but for other people. But if you could give them a space, I love it. Bring out the resourcefulness, bring out the problem solving, bring out the character, bring out the charisma, bring out their values and traits. And if you could do that in a great way, then they were engaged, they were happy, and the front of house facing the customer was better too. Is that what we're talking about, or what would you add to that, or would you critique that?
The interesting part about that, I mean, that's a really good way of illustrating an example, which is brilliant, about harnessing your team and the everyday genius. And you said something really important: getting out of the way, but re-engaging in a different way, not as a manager, but as a coach.
Yes.
As an advisor. And I think the role of managers really have to change from managing, which means it's controlling in many ways, to mentoring and advising. And I think that's really critical at this time. But that requires a lot of training and development. And this is, I think, where much of the resources have been cut.